one day this file came across a fellow clerk's desk, the United States versus Sam Carlisi. Sam Carlisi was at that time the boss of the Chicago outfit. So I quickly got that file and began a journey down the rabbit hole of inside the Chicago outfit from the perspective of the federal government.
How's your approach when you intake a client? Like, do you ever battle that kind of, this person's guilty, but I have a job to do at the same time?
All the time. On both sides, as prosecutor and as a defense attorney, you stay awake and stare at the ceiling at night and think about what will happen in the future if I don't do my job.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Millennial's Choice Show. I'm your host, Matthew, and I'm here with my brother, Danny.
What's going up, guys?
It's good to be back with you guys today. We've got a very interesting episode for you. It's a completely different perspective that you've seen from our channel. Normally, we're interviewing, mob guys, ex-detectives, things like that, but we haven't interviewed a criminal lawyer, and he has a very unique perspective on some of this organized crime stuff. So he's going to be sharing his story, and we want to welcome to the show Paul Whitcombe. Welcome to the show.
Thank you both. It's great to be here.
Yes, sir. So, one of our mutual friends who we've had on the show before put us in touch, and we were happy to, do this, and we're going to be doing an in-person interview soon when we come to Chicago. So that's going to be very interesting. But how you doing? How's life?
Better than I deserve, gentlemen. I'm a blessed man.
What makes you say that? Why better than you deserve? Why don't you deserve it?
Well, I've had 3 grandchildren in the last year, and that's a big transition to go from thinking of yourself as a young man to being grandfather of 3. And I just feel like it's a good idea to be mindful of your blessings and not get too complacent or to start thinking you're entitled to what you've got. You appreciate it more when you think of it as more than what you deserve.
There's definitely a lot of entitlement in our society these days, especially with, my generation, millennials and Gen Zs. It's like a lot of them feel that they're entitled to a lot of things, but some of us feel like we have to work for it. We have to earn it, and we're in a different season in our lives. We just had our children, so our parents have become grandparents. And I know they're excited for that. You look very young. Like how old are your kids?
My oldest boy is going to be 29 this fall, and they go down to 15 from there.
Oh, nice. Well, congratulations on being a grandparent.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's wonderful. It's just wonderful.
So, Paul, for our viewers that are tuning in for the first time and they're hearing about you for the first time, why don't you start us at the beginning? Who was Paul Whitcombe when he was in his university years? What made you want to become a lawyer and then a criminal lawyer? Because I studied, my undergrad here at York University was actually law and society. And the path that I was going to go down was criminal law. I enjoyed reading criminal cases. But I just had that kind of, for me, it was like a moral question. Do I defend criminals or do I become a prosecutor? And I just chose a completely different path. But what was your mindset going into that career?
In undergrad, one of my closest friends' father was a very successful defense attorney. And we were sitting around the kitchen table one night and he got a phone call. And he hung up the phone and he said, well, I really could use some advice. And he said that he had been a lifelong Democrat. And the local Republican Party had called him and said, listen, there's going to be an opening for a judge. We think you're the right guy, but you're going to have to become a Republican to do that. And he said, if I take this job, I can help a lot of people. I can make a difference for a lot of people. And I don't care what label I'm wearing if I have that ability. And he asked us all what we thought about it. And that launched us into a conversation about how to have influence on people's lives at moments when they need you the most. And I decided, based on that conversation, to go to law school. And while in law school, I happened to be sitting behind a couple of people that had a real distinct energy about them. And I leaned over to a friend of mine who had grown up in Chicago, whose grandfather had been highly connected, a bookie. And he said, well, those are Tony Accardo's two grandchildren. And I had been studying Tony Accardo and about the outfit for quite a while. And I reached out to an author that I had been turned on to by the name of Bill Romer. Bill Romer was the most decorated FBI agent in the history of the United States. He had written a book called Man Against the Mob, which was about his career chasing the Chicago outfit. And I'd reached out to him. He had reached back out to me. We became friends. He wrote to me many times. I got to meet him a few times when he came to the city. And so I was fascinated with the Chicago outfit and organized crime. And one day this file came across a fellow clerk's desk, the United States versus Sam Carlisi, the new case that had been assigned to my judge. Sam Carlisi was at that time the boss of the Chicago outfit. He was indicted along with little Jimmy Marcello. Lenny Patrick, a highly placed Chicago outfit boss, had turned state's evidence. First time that anything like that had ever happened in Chicago. And he had turned against Sam Carlisi and Gussie Alex, and they were both on trial. So I quickly arranged to trade cases with my fellow clerk and got that file and began a journey down the rabbit hole of inside the Chicago outfit from the perspective of the federal government. And working for Sam Carlisi at that time was a gentleman by the name of Tom Sullivan, who was a United States attorney and had gone to Jenner and Block as a major partner. So I got the inside look for that entire trial, got to be in with the judge, sitting on the bench with the judge. I got to attend Gus Alex's trial and sit next to Antoinette Giancana, who was Sam Giancana's daughter, the mafia princess. And I got color commentary from her, which was very interesting. And that started a fascination with the Chicago outfit that would follow me later into my days at Jenner and Block, where I became a criminal defense attorney, and into my days as a prosecutor and founding of the Kings, Killers, and Clowns webpage. And everything that's happened since then has unfolded from the day that file landed on my friend's desk.
You hands down, Paul, have one of the coolest nicknames out there, the Mobologist. Can you unpack that for us, please? Because when I saw that, I'm like, that is so sick. Talk to us a little bit about being a Mobologist. What are the credentials you got to have?
That's exactly what it's about, is credentials. Some people are former cops. Some people are former mobsters who have flipped. Some people are family members. And then there's people like me that have a different perspective. And I guess mobologist would be anybody with enough connection to that world to provide a unique perspective. So it could be any of those people, or none of those people. For me, the connection was working in the federal government for the judge who was trying these cases, seeing what the defense was doing, seeing what the prosecution was doing, getting to spend time every day interacting with Lenny Patrick and Sam Carlisi and Jimmy Marcello and Tony the Hatch Chiaramonte, and spending time with Antoinette Giancana. And all that boils down to one day Joey Seifert and I were sitting around with John William Toohey, who's written handfuls of books about the Chicago outfit. And we thought, what do we call ourselves? Because we were doing a TV show at the time called Inside the Chicago Outfit. And Jim Forney, who was the producer, and one of us said, what about Mobologist? And it just fit perfectly. And Jim put it in the show, and he spoke it in the show, and it stuck. So that's how it got started.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I thought it fit. I really did.
I like it. You guys, you should have a trademark on that if you don't already have one.
That's a good idea. It's a very good idea.
I like it. So
you know how it is on the internet. You find a wonderful picture of say Tony Accardo, a family picture from the 30s, he's with his wife, and you put that up on the web, and you're so proud that you have it. And in 10 minutes, it's on 10 other sites, and everybody's claiming they got it first. And so I don't know that a trademark would do much good on social media these days, but that is a unique term, and I like it.
Well, if you don't mind, we might use it. So
You can use it without attribution.
I will give you credit for it.
That's more than most.
So can I ask about, Sam, when this whole situation started to unravel and you've got the boss there, testifying, and it's really the first time in the history of the Chicago outfit that this is taking place. What did that feel like? What was the energy like in the room, in Chicago, in the streets? Because obviously I feel like when that happens, there's more crime or criminal activity that takes place. You might start seeing bodies drop and things like that start to come about. So what was the feeling like during those days?
Unbelievable. Rumors started to fly. Lenny Patrick, for those who don't know, was a very powerful member of the Chicago outfit, but he was not Italian. He was Jewish, which was unique in Chicago. One of the reasons why Chicago was so powerful. But that's for another day. But Lenny Patrick had been caught on a wire. And how this often happens is a series of dominoes. A lower level operative by the name of Mario Ranone was on the way to break open a door for the guy by the name of Jeeps Didino. Sam Carlisi decided he needed to be killed. So you remember that scene in Casino where they go to the mob boss and say, should we kill this guy? And the mob boss says, why take a chance? In real life, that was Sam Carlisi who said, someone's got to knock over this Jeeps or people are going to get hurt, including me. So they sent Mario Ranone out to kill him. Mario Ranone is driving out to Jeeps Didino to break the door open, and he sees two Chicago mobsters following him, one of whom was Willie the Beast Messino, and he knew what that meant. It meant that they meant to get rid of Mario Ranone, too. So Mario Ranone flipped, unflipped, flipped back, but during part of the time he was flipped, he recorded Lenny Patrick talking about mafia activity, extortions. Lenny Patrick was 79 years old at the time and knew that if he didn't do something, he'd never get out of prison. So he flipped on Gus Alex and Sam Carlisi, the two most powerful mobsters probably in the country at that time. It was amazing. Within a few days of the start of all this, Sharon Patrick's BMW blew up in her driveway. And the message was sent to Lenny Patrick. But he saw it through. And I'll tell you, gentlemen, that guy, he had the energy of a cornered rat. Every time you saw him, he was going to do anything he could do to bring up his end of the deal so he didn't spend his life in prison. And it started a fascinating time, which, in my opinion, led to the downfall of the Chicago outfit.
So we've interviewed Mike Dowd. He was an ex-New York Police Department detective, and he was corrupt and all that stuff. And he shares his story. Maybe you've heard of it, but when you just said what you mentioned about Larry, that energy, and he'll do whatever he can to get out of that situation. Like, how credible is his testimony at that point when you're in the room and there's lawyers and there's other, they're saying this guy's going to say whatever he can just to save his own skin. That's obviously a question that's asked behind closed doors, but walk us through that process. Do the prosecutors still say, you know what, we're trying to catch the big fish, so we don't care what he says? Like, we don't care if he's exaggerating it or he's putting crimes on Sam, for example, or like, what's that like?
That's always a balancing act because prosecutors know that these guys are not hanging out with nuns and that they are dangerous, evil people. And Lenny Patrick murdered multiple people and admitted to it on the stand. So everybody knew, and of course that was the emphasis of the defense, that Lenny Patrick was not to be believed unless what he said was corroborated. And Tom Sullivan did something which shook everybody to the core. He came into court with a Cuban documentary that named Lenny Patrick as the shooter on the grassy knoll who shot President Kennedy. And he wanted to use that to impeach Lenny Patrick as the presidential assassin and therefore not to be believable. Wow. So that started a fascinating little chapter in that trial where I had to review the sealed Kennedy assassination files for the judge to see if there was any basis to believe that this man on the stand had killed President Kennedy.
You know what happened to JFK?
Let's just say I know what didn't happen to him.
What didn't happen?
He didn't get shot by Lenny Patrick.
There's so many rumors and theories about that. It's crazy. What, you think the mob was involved in that?
Absolutely not. It sounds great. It makes for a very exciting story, and those guys hated JFK. But they were all being recorded by illegal mics at the time that this happened. And when the Chicago outfit had their daily meeting the day after Kennedy was killed, they were on a recorded microphone. And they were all happy about it. You know, somebody got that son of a bitch, but none of them said anything other than they were glad he was gone. Nobody indicated they had anything to do with it. They were just as surprised as everybody else. And the outfit has a rule. You don't mess with cops. You don't mess with journalists. And the reason for that is it brings way too much heat. It's just not worth it. There's no way that the outfit would have gone after the president of the United States. That would have been the end of the outfit for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Paul, I'm so curious to ask. So you're seeing all this unfold in front of your eyes, and, you know, how would you say that played a role into where you're at right now? Because correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you're a criminal defense lawyer right now. You're no longer working for the federal government, right?
That's right.
Was there a point in time where you're like, okay, you know, I don't want to work for the government now. Now I want to work for, you know, defending people?
Absolutely. I was at the government for a short period of time. A lot of lawyers in these big national firms, they spent time as federal law clerks. And that's how I did that. And Jenner and Block was generous enough to keep my job open. And I actually went to work for Jenner and for Tom Sullivan, who had been Carlisi's main defense attorney and was a big character in a lot of the stories that I have from that trial. So I wanted to be him, actually. And he was tremendously skilled, and everybody at Jenner and Block was and still is absolutely the best of the best. And I wanted to be a part of that. It was exciting to see your cases on the front page of the Chicago Tribune every day.
That's awesome.
Was there ever a moment as you're going through these trials, and it could be other trials as well, you're with the prosecution team and you're looking at them and you're saying, I want these guys caught, I want these guys in prison, I want them to do their time, but you are kind of tiptoeing the line between black and white and gray, and you know, we're becoming like the bad guys in some regards. Was there ever any of those moments that took place?
There are all kinds of those moments. As a matter of fact, I've spoken with members of the outfit who would say the very same thing that you just said, is that at some point the government becomes the bad guy in their zeal to pursue criminals. And we can all question their judgment about why are we going after these guys instead of these guys, and what makes these particular criminals worthy of all that attention. But my view of my role as a criminal defense attorney is not that I've got the weight of seeing the justice for the whole country is done, but more that I just make sure the government meets its burden of proof, because our whole justice system is so heavily weighted against the defendant. I mean, think about this. Tony Spilotro was charged with crimes many, many times. And in one of those times he said, it's the United States versus Tony Spilotro. What kind of odds are those? Think about that. And the enormous power of the government coming to bear on one individual. Somebody has to put their finger on the scale and say, we're going to make sure that the government meets every burden of proof that's built into our system of laws, because otherwise people can just be crushed, and anybody can be charged with anything if there isn't somebody willing to stand in the gap and say, wait a minute, there are protections that are built into our system, and they have to be respected. Without them, we descend into chaos.
Yeah, I agree. That oversight is so important. But it's such a balancing act, right? Like we're looking at what's happening in El Salvador. They cleaned up the country, but they took an extreme measure to do so. And there are a few innocent people in prison now. I know the president was speaking about the fact that it's not like they were just innocent people from the street. They might have had a connection, or it was a family member of a gang member. And so they're working through the cases now to make sure those people get out of prison. But then you look at what's happening currently in the United States with the former president and his case, and then the current president and his son's case. And there's so much like stuff going on. So I want to throw some of that at you. With regards to President Trump's case specifically, they were denied a request to have the trial outside of New York, which is typically a Democratic state. So they have a jury that's full of people that vote Democrat. There's all kinds of stuff that happened behind the scenes with the district attorney. What are your thoughts on how that case how it's transpired?
Well, I have two thoughts. The first one is that had he not been Donald Trump, what he was accused of doing would never have been prosecuted. As a former prosecutor, those kind of things are just not considered worthy of that kind of effort. But the second point that I have is, were Hunter Biden not Hunter Biden, he would not have been prosecuted either. I see people every month or every week that put something that's not entirely true on a firearms application, and I've never seen anybody prosecuted for it. So the overall answer that I have for you is I'm very concerned about the weaponization of the justice system by either side, because I think it's detrimental to not only our system, but to everybody's freedom. And it really concerns me to see what's happening now. You don't have to like Trump or like Hunter Biden or any of these people to be really concerned about what this means when you see the justice system being used as a political weapon. That's a very, very dark day.
I definitely feel it's a slippery slope for sure, because them weaponizing, the rule of law doesn't really, it just serves their own purposes, right? It doesn't really do what it's supposed to do, which is uphold law and order, right? So I completely agree with you. 100%. It's definitely a slippery slope.
It really frightens me, but our whole system is built on one word, and that is discretion. The police have discretion to who they arrest. The prosecutors have discretion as to who they charge. The judges have discretion as to what the sentence will be, or whether or not the defendant is going to be found guilty. So the whole system is built around individual choices, and at any step of the process, those choices can be abused, and that creates a problem.
When you're taking on clients, are there moments where that this person is guilty, or they just flat out tell you that they're guilty, and then you have to kind of work the system to, get them off? Or do you just, how's your approach when you intake a client? Like, do you ever battle that kind of, this person's guilty, they did this offense, but I have a job to do at the same time? Like, do you ever battle that?
All the time, on both sides, as prosecutor and as a defense attorney. You stay awake and stare at the ceiling at night and think about what will happen in the future if I don't do my job. As a defense attorney, in 30 years, I've probably had 3 clients come into my office, sit down and say, look, I did this. Give me the best deal you can. That's pretty rare. Most of the time, I don't ask, because it's the jury's job to decide if the defendant is proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. All I want to know is there enough evidence to prove it? Because not guilty does not mean innocent. Not guilty means not proved. And there's a big difference between not guilty and innocent, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. It makes a lot of sense. It's like I'm hearing you speak and I'm saying, wow, like this is someone who was on the other side and now, became like, you have all that experience as a prosecutor that you now bring to your current business. It brings value to your clients. How do you feel about like when a client that, has committed the crime, but is not found guilty and it's like a serious crime? Like how does that make you feel?
Well, two ways. First, it means that the prosecutor was not able to present the evidence necessary to convince the jury. That means the system works as it should. The prosecution has a high burden because they have all the power. They have a police department. They have a team of prosecutors. They have all these things that a defendant doesn't have. So if they're not able to prove a defendant guilty, then the system, there should be a not guilty finding. So in that sense, I'm happy about that. But the other side of it can be difficult. Here's a good example. Several years ago, I had a client who was accused of breaking into a house, making a mess and stealing a bunch of things. And the police had illegally obtained his confession. It was pretty obvious that it was illegal. They tied him to a chair and stood over him with M16s and really intimidated him. Well, I was able to get his confession suppressed and there was no evidence left against him, so they had to let him go. But within hours, this individual kidnapped his former girlfriend and murdered her current boyfriend and then took his own life. And on some level, I know that I played a role in that. And it's difficult to know how to file that away emotionally. I did my job and I did it very well. But if I hadn't done it so well, those people might very well still be alive. So that's difficult to carry.
Is that something that you wrestle with daily, or is it kind of one of those things where, you process through it and now you really don't look back?
I don't think it ever goes away, but it keeps me balanced to not go too far in one direction or the other, or results like that, I don't think ever go away. But you have to come to a point where you can accept it or you can't do your job.
I'm nobody to say, but I feel like at the end of the day, as you said, you did your job. But there is no accountability or responsibility on you, in my opinion, for what that person did, because they're an adult, right? So they made that decision, they made that choice, and there are consequences for those actions. But you mentioned something at the very start of our interview when you said, thank God life is good. So you believe in God? You have a spirituality component or faith component in your life?
Very much so. I don't know how anybody can get up in the morning and face life without thinking that there's a higher purpose and that there's something more. Without that, I don't think I could do it. I think it takes more faith to believe that everything came from nothing than it does to believe that there is a creator. And I find that very, very comforting.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much more evidence supporting that there's a creator as opposed to us just coming into the world on its own, for example. Do you feel like we get our morality from that higher power, like from God?
I think so. I think so. Once you take God out of the equation, what's the basis for any morality? If we're just animals following animal instincts, then what's the basis for the societal compact? Why do we even have laws? Why do we have rules unless there's some meaning to this, unless we're more than just machines made out of meat?
I agree. I feel like if we're the moral authority ourselves, then it's just a matter of opinion. Somebody might think it's okay to murder millions of people in a Holocaust, and other people might say, well, we think that's wrong, right? But who are we to judge if there's no higher morality that we can look up to besides our own? Makes
right.
sense.
Everything, otherwise it becomes all relative. And how do you have any system of governance or laws if everything is relative?
Was there a sort of respect? And just to close off that point, it takes a lot of faith to be an atheist. That's the old saying, right? It takes a lot of
Right.
faith to be an atheist. Was there ever any moments where, you're seeing these guys on the street? Some of them are being prosecuted, are in the middle of trial, and you're seeing them. Is there some sort of like mutual respect that goes on, or do you feel like during those days where the trials are taking place, there's a target on your back?
I never felt that way because I was representing the judge, and I never at any time felt anything in that nature. I did interact with Sam Carlisi daily. He was always friendly and respectful, congenial. Some of the others were pretty scary, but I think that's just because of who they are. Tony the Hatch gave me chills down my spine. He was just a scary, scary man. And Lenny Patrick was pretty scary too. Gus Alex was always very friendly, very nice. So no, I never really felt that way. Now, there have been occasions since then where people who were convicted at that trial have made comments to me about how it was unfair or things like that. But no one's ever threatened me or made me feel uncomfortable.
When we're talking to you, all that keeps running in my mind is the Lincoln Lawyer with Matthew McConaughey. That just keeps running through my mind. I don't know why. How realistic was that movie?
Well, there are things in there that are just purely for dramatic purposes. And surprise evidence just doesn't turn up all the time. Like, he winds up finding these miraculous bits of evidence that in real life that just doesn't happen. But it sure makes for entertaining TV. I really like it.
I was thinking about Better Call Saul as we were talking to Paul. I was just thinking about the stuff that happens in that show, and I'm like, do you what's the craziest? I have to ask this. What's the craziest thing you've ever experienced besides the Chicago outfit, of course, in your own trials and clients? What's the craziest thing, if you're able to disclose it?
Sure.
What would you describe or tell us?
There's a short list, and I guess number one would be I was doing a gang murder trial down at the 26th in California facility, which is the largest jail in the world, is in Cook County at 26th in Cal, and there's a courthouse there, a criminal courthouse. And I represented a young gang member who had been accused of encouraging another gang member to murder a rival. And we had the trial, and at 26 in Cal, the courtrooms are blocked off by bulletproof glass from the galley, so the crowd can't get in to do something, in theory. Well, my client was found not guilty, and one side was the Black Pea Stone Rangers, and the other side was, I don't recall what the other gang was at the moment, but it was very divided. When our client was found not guilty, the gang of the victim, all of them stood up and rushed the bulletproof partition and broke through it to try to get to my client. And there was a couple of bailiffs there, but we were just overwhelmed with 30, 40 people, and it's going after my client. And there was a big fight right there in the courtroom, and deputies coming in left and right, and the judge running out the back door. And it was scary, to put it mildly. But we wound up going out into the holding cell, and nobody was seriously hurt, but they were gonna kill him right there in the courtroom.
That's insane. Wow. Were you scared at that moment in time?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Very scared. I don't think that those guys liked me much at all.
Do you regret anything?
I don't think so. For very good reasons, I decided to leave the big city and that life after my first son was born and move out to a smaller town where I've had lots of experience. Lots of experience. I've tried about 100 jury trials. I've got to know a lot of good people. I still go to the city when I want to, but I was present for my children's lives, and so I would never change that.
That's awesome. So we have a mutual friend who connected us, and his family was connected. And then I don't know, are you familiar? Well, obviously you're familiar, but do you have any kind of relationship with Kurt Calabrese?
I do know Kurt. We've spoken on many occasions, and he's a good guy. He's got a great story to tell. His father was really something, as Kurt will tell you. I've spent time talking with Kurt, and am fascinated by that whole story.
Did you ever run into that part of the family, like during your time as a prosecutor?
No, I did not have any dealings with them. They were later, so they were still around when I was doing these things, but the family secrets trial and all that took place after I left the city, and I followed it, but I didn't get to enjoy that like I did the Carlisi and Gus Alex trials. But those sets of trials were really bookends on the end of the outfit.
If you had to pick one thing, one candidate, I should say, not one thing, one candidate in your upcoming election, given everything that's transpired in the last few months, assuming somebody doesn't get swapped for somebody else, who's got your vote?
Boy, that's really tough. Most of my friends and family are firmly one way or the other. I'm really sad for America that these are our choices. I'm not trying to avoid your question, but it's not a good choice, one way or the other. After what happened at the debate the other night, I think everybody is legitimately concerned about President Biden. And boy, I'm really disturbed that this apparently has been going on and kept from us for some time. But then on the other hand, we got this guy that has been in an awful lot of trouble. Just can't seem to keep his mouth shut. Guys, I may have to sit this one out. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, even if you sit it out, probably won't make much of a difference with all these mail-in ballots that you guys have.
Fair enough.
I'm just curious because every American that we speak with, we ask them that question now because it's becoming so, like, it's such a big deal, right? It's such a big deal. And it's like the way that I'm seeing it from an outsider perspective is if you like the way the country was run these last 3.5 years, then you vote that way. If you like the way it was run prior to that for 4 years, then you vote that way because those are the choices you have, right?
Right. Yeah, fair enough. And the way things are going, who knows who's going to be running? We know Trump will be one of them, but as far as who the other one is, I think there's a legitimate question about that.
Paul, I have to ask you. I've been thinking about this question the whole time during the interview, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask it.
Sure.
Any advice for people that get arrested and the police want to have a little chat with them?
You have the right to remain silent. Use it. There's nothing you can say that will help you or convince them to change their minds. If you think you're smarter than the police, you got another thing coming. Keep your mouth shut. So my advice is, in 30 years of criminal defense, I'm generally very successful unless my client's own words are to be used against them. Then, not so good.
Yeah, we had a little instance ourselves, actually. My wife and I were out one night, and she had parked her car on the curb. And, on our way home, we took my car on our way home. Danny gives me a call. He says, "How was your night?" "Good. Don't be mad, but someone crashed into Sarah's car while it was parked." And the guy came back. He drove home, parked his car, and then walked back and rang the doorbell and told us about what had happened. So turns out he was under the influence. He was clearly drunk. And when we arrived on the scene, the car was a mess. One of the cops showed up. He just points to the guy. He goes, "You, over here." And he gives him a breathalyzer. And we heard him say, "You're driving with a suspended license," and takes him away. And all of a sudden, another cop shows up to kind of take our testimony. But I mean, I wasn't there. It's not like we saw it or heard it. Danny kind of gave him what he knew, and we got summoned to appear in court. And when we showed up, as good citizens, and this guy's lawyer, he did something where he delayed the trial till the afternoon, and it was supposed to be at 9:30 in the morning. And we said, we're leaving. We're not sticking around for this. Like, we're taking a day off of work. We weren't even there. Like, we didn't even see it. Like, how credible is our testimony going to be anyways? And the lawyer that was, I guess, the prosecutor, came up to us and said, you have a responsibility. This guy's going to walk away scot-free because he was drunk and we can't place him behind the wheel. And I said to the lawyer, lawyer, like, what is our testimony going to do to change that? Like, at the end of the day, like, can't you get a warrant and he has a history of this, and go look at his garage and his car? And if you see that the car was in an accident, you could kind of put two and two together. Like, it was kind of like simple for me, but I was shocked at the fact that this guy's driving with a suspended license. They did a breathalyzer on site. He was clearly drunk, but because they couldn't place him behind the wheel and he was drunk, his lawyer can just argue that he didn't know what he was saying. He never hit the car. He was drunk. And it's kind of that simple, is it not?
I have cases like that all the time where DUI clients are smart enough to get away from the scene and get out of the car. And there are a number of stories about that. Prosecutor has to prove that you were driving the vehicle at the time you're intoxicated. But they can certainly use circumstantial evidence, just like you pointed out.
Yeah. See, so I don't know. I feel like at some points, like you said it earlier, when the prosecutor doesn't provide a certain burden of evidence or burden of proof that, without a reasonable doubt, this person can be convicted and they're guilty, then that's the system working. But certain times, like, the cop did the breathalyzer, the guy walked back to the scene. Like, I just feel like, for me, like, the system let society down in that case. But maybe it was just a situation where there was a broken chain in the events that took place that caused that to happen. Because this guy could be on the street now. He didn't care that he had a suspended license. He's driving. He's drinking. God forbid one day he crashes into somebody and kills them. Right.
Well, that's the problem, though. They were telling us that they couldn't charge him criminally, apparently, because they couldn't place him behind the wheel. So he wasn't really going to get any jail time. He was just going to have his license further suspended. Right? Like, that's what they were saying to us. So
something.
I kind of find that
apparently he doesn't care
crazy.
about that anyway.
Clearly doesn't care about that. Paul, we're very excited for part 2 of this interview. When we come down to Chicago, we got to get some deep dish pizza because there really isn't any deep dish pizza spots. There used to be one called Double D's during the pandemic. We used to go there on the Queensway, but it was all right. I think he's not in business anymore. But when we come to Chicago, we're going to get together with you, Joey, Kurt. Maybe we'll do a panel. We'll do an exclusive thing. But before we close off the show, and then just stick around as we close off, is there any kind of last words you want to leave our audience with? Where can they find you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way to find me is the Kings, Killers, and Clowns, the Chicago Underworld, and that's on the Facebook. And from there, you'll find all kinds of fascinating history, connected people, former mobsters, former detectives, former state's attorneys. Of course, Joey's there. I'm there. Kurt can be found there. It's very easy to find. So we'd be happy to answer any questions, get to know people there. And then on YouTube, you can find Inside the Chicago Outfit. The first season's episodes are there, and you can watch those and get some inside information on organized crime in Chicago.
I love it.
Awesome. Thank you again so much. This was great.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you for coming on the show. You guys, make sure you're subscribing, you're liking, leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought. And until next time, we're out.
We're out.